Captain Zexhai pressed his four-fingered hand against the bridge window of the Harmony's edge. The stars outside looked normal, but his sensors were screaming impossible readings. His crew had been exploring the empty space between star systems. For 3 months mapping trade routes for the Galactic Confederation, they never expected to find anything out here in the void. "Captain," called Dr. Veltar from her station. The crystalline scientist's body glowed soft blue as she processed data through her natural computing matrix. "The readings are getting stronger. Whatever is out there, it's big. Really big." Zexhai turned to face his science officer. In his 30 years of space exploration, he had seen many strange things. Gas clouds that sang, planets made of pure diamond, stars that burned cold. But this felt different. This felt wrong. "Show me," he ordered. The main screen flickered to life. At first, there was nothing but black space and distant stars. Then Veltar adjusted the sensors, and everyone on the bridge gasped. Floating in, the darkness was a massive ship. It looked like someone had taken 3 city blocks and stretched them into the sky. The hull was dark metal, but it seemed to move and shift, even though the ship was perfectly still. "By the 7 moons," whispered Commander Thrix. The warrior caste Vorthon rarely showed surprise, but his yellow eyes were wide with shock. "What is that thing?" Veltar's crystalline form pulsed faster as she ran more scans. "Captain, this is impossible. The ship appears to be made of materials that don't exist. My scanners can't even identify what it's built from. The energy readings are... They're breaking my equipment." Zexhai studied the strange vessel on the screen. It was clearly a ship, but unlike anything in the Confederation database. The design was alien but somehow familiar. Smooth curves mixed with sharp angles in ways that hurt to look at for too long. Strange symbols covered the hull, glowing faintly with their own light. "Any response to our signals?" he asked. The communications officer, a young Zenthari named Kip, shook his head. His tentacles moved nervously as he worked his controls. "Nothing, Captain. No response on any frequency. But there's something strange. The ship seems to be listening. Every time I send a signal, something inside responds, but not in any way I can understand." Zexhai made his decision. "Prepare. A boarding party. Full environmental suits. We're going aboard." "Sir," Thrix spoke up. "That might not be wise. We have no idea what we're dealing with. This ship could be a trap, or worse." "That's exactly why we need to investigate," Zexhai replied. "If this is some new weapon or threat to the Confederation, we need to know about it." An hour later, Zexhai led a small team across the void between ships. Their magnetic boots clanked against the strange hull as they searched for an entry point. Up close, the ship looked even more impossible. The metal seemed to ripple like water, but felt solid under their feet. Veltar ran her scanning equipment along the hull. "Captain, this material is responding to our presence. It's almost like it's alive, but not in any way I understand." They found what looked like an airlock, though it opened before they could figure out how to operate it. The entrance was clearly designed for bipedal creatures about their size, but the angles were all wrong. It was as if the builders had a different understanding of geometry than the rest of the galaxy. Inside, emergency lighting cast strange shadows down long corridors. The air was breathable but felt thick and heavy. Their footsteps echoed strangely, as if the ship was much larger, inside than outside. Every surface was covered in the same flowing symbols they had seen on the hull. "The power systems are incredible," Veltar whispered as they walked. "The ship is running on energy sources I can't identify. It's like it's drawing power from space itself." They followed the main corridor deeper into the ship. Rooms branched off to either side, filled with equipment and technology that made no sense. Screens showed images of stars and planets, but the constellations were unfamiliar. Computers hummed with processing power beyond anything the Confederation had developed. "Look at this," Thrix called from a side room. The warrior was standing before a wall covered in pictures. They showed beings that looked almost familiar. 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head. But their faces were different from any known species. Smooth skin, small noses, hair growing from their scalps in various colors. "These must be the builders," Zexhai said, studying the images. "But they're not in any of our databases." "Who were they?" The answer came from deeper in the ship. Following the sound of working machinery, they found a chamber filled with blinking lights and humming computers. In the center was a tube filled with cloudy liquid. Inside the tube was one of the beings from the pictures, though this one was clearly still alive. The creature was tall and thin with pale skin and dark hair. It wore simple clothing and had various tubes and wires connected to its body. Its chest rose and fell slowly, showing it was breathing. A small screen next to the tube displayed vital signs that seemed stable. "It's some kind of cryogenic system," Veltar said, scanning the equipment. "But it's not like any preservation technology I know. This being has been kept alive, not frozen, for a very long time, based on these readings." As they watched, the creature's eyes opened. They were brown and very much alive, filled with intelligence and something that looked like hope. The being saw them through the cloudy liquid and began trying to communicate, pointing at controls near the base of the tube. Zexhai looked at his team. "Should we wake it up?" "The risk is enormous," Thrix warned. "We don't know what it might do. But it might be our only chance to understand this ship," Veltar added. "And it doesn't look dangerous, just tired and alone." The creature in the tube continued pointing at the controls, its movements becoming more urgent. It seemed to understand that these visitors might be its only hope of freedom. Zexhai made his decision. "Dr. Veltar, can you safely operate their systems?" The crystalline scientist studied the controls. "I think so. The technology is strange, but the basic principles seem familiar. It will take a few minutes." As Veltar worked, the creature watched, with growing hope. When the tube finally opened with a soft hiss, thick liquid drained away. The being coughed and gasped as it breathed normal air for the first time in who knew how long. "Easy," Zexhai said, moving forward to help steady the creature as it stepped out of the tube. "We're friends. We won't hurt you." The being looked at each of them with wonder, as if it couldn't believe they were real. When it finally spoke, its voice was rough from disuse, but filled with emotion. "My name is Marcus Chen," it said in accented but understandable galactic standard. "I'm chief engineer of the UES Prometheus. I've been waiting for someone to find us for 312 years, 4 months, and 16 days. I was starting to think I might be the last person left, alive in the universe." Zexhai helped Marcus to a nearby chair. The human was weak but alert, his eyes taking in every detail of his rescuers. "Where are the others of your crew?" Veltar asked gently. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Dead. All of them. I'm the only one left. I've been keeping this ship running, waiting for rescue that I wasn't even sure would come. But I couldn't give up. I wouldn't let myself die, not while there was still work to do." He looked around at the humming machinery that surrounded them. "This ship, she's special. Impossible, really. And she's been my home, my prison, and my purpose for longer than some civilizations have existed. I suppose you want to know how I got here, and what this ship really is." Marcus Chen smiled for the first time in centuries. "It's quite a story." Marcus Chen sat in the medical bay of the Harmony's Edge, sipping hot soup that tasted better than anything he remembered from his old life. Dr. Veltar monitored his vital signs while Captain Zexhai and Commander Thrix listened to his story. His body was weak from centuries of minimal nutrition, but his mind was sharp and clear. "Earth was beautiful," Marcus began, staring out at the stars through the medical bay window. Blue oceans, green forests, white clouds. 7 billion people living their lives dreaming of the stars. We thought we were so clever, so advanced. We had just developed faster-than-light travel and were ready to spread across the galaxy. He paused to take another sip of soup. The warmth felt good in his throat after so long. The Prometheus was our first colony ship. 50,000 people, the best and brightest humanity had to offer. Scientists, engineers, artists, teachers, families with children. We were going to find a new world and build a second Earth. Everyone was so excited, so hopeful. Veltar's crystalline body dimmed with sympathy. What happened to them? Marcus closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked every one of his impossible years. We got greedy. The faster-than-light drive worked, but it was slow. It would take decades to reach even the nearest habitable planets. So our scientists came up with a brilliant idea. They thought they could modify the drive to tear a hole directly through space, creating shortcuts across the galaxy. Dimensional breach technology, Thrix said with recognition. The Confederation banned those experiments centuries ago. Too dangerous. We should have been smarter, Marcus agreed. But humans, we've never been good at accepting limitations. If something seems impossible, we just work harder to make it possible. Our scientists spent months preparing the new drive system. They ran every calculation, tested every component. Everything looked perfect. He stood and walked to the window, placing his hand against the cool metal. Outside, the Prometheus floated in space, its impossible hull shifting and changing in ways that hurt to watch. The test was supposed to be simple. We would jump from Earth's orbit to Alpha Centauri and back. A quick trip to prove the technology worked. But when we activated the drive, Marcus shook his head. We didn't tear a small hole in space. We tore a massive wound in reality itself. The breach consumed our solar system in minutes. Earth, Mars, Jupiter, the Sun. Everything was pulled into a dimensional void that shouldn't exist. The room was quiet except for the hum of medical equipment. Zexhai finally spoke. How did your ship survive? We shouldn't have, Marcus said simply. By all the laws of physics, we should have been destroyed instantly. But somehow, the Prometheus was caught right at the edge of the breach when it happened. Instead of being destroyed, we were changed. He gestured toward the window where his impossible ship waited. The breach filled the Prometheus with exotic matter from other dimensions, matter that doesn't follow normal rules. The ship became something new, something that exists between realities. And everyone aboard. Everyone died except you? Veltar asked gently. Marcus nodded. The exotic matter was too much for normal human biology. Most people died instantly. Others lasted a few days before their bodies couldn't handle the changes. I was in the engine room when it happened, trying to shut down the drive. I got the worst exposure to the exotic energy, but somehow that saved me. He held up his hand, and his rescuers saw that his skin had a faint shimmer to it, as if he was slightly out of focus. The energy changed me. My body learned to work with the exotic matter instead of being destroyed by it. I became connected to the ship in ways I still don't fully understand. That's impossible, Thrix said. No biological organism can survive that level of dimensional exposure. Marcus smiled sadly. I know. I've had 300 years to think about how impossible I am. But humans have always been good at surviving impossible things. We're too stubborn to die when we're supposed to. Dr. Veltar ran another scan of Marcus's body. Captain, his cellular structure is unlike anything I've seen. He's still human, but the exotic matter has integrated into every part of his biology. He's not exactly alive in the traditional sense, but he's not dead either. He exists in a quantum state between the two, which explains how you've survived for so long, Zexhai said. Surviving was the easy part, Marcus replied. The hard part was staying sane. Do you know what it's like to be alone for 3 centuries? To walk through corridors where you can still hear the echoes of friends laughing? To see empty rooms where families used to live? He returned to his chair, suddenly looking very tired. I kept myself busy. The ship needed constant repairs and adjustments to stay stable in normal space. The exotic matter wants to return to its home dimension, and I had to learn how to convince it to stay. I became part engineer, part quantum physicist, and part magician. Why didn't you just let the ship return to its dimension? Thrix asked. Because this ship contains the last record of humanity, Marcus said firmly. Our history, our culture, our dreams. Everything we ever created or hoped to create. In the ship's databases are the stories of 7 billion people who died because we reached too far too fast. I couldn't let that be forgotten. He stood and walked to a control panel, placing his hand on it. The panel lit up with symbols and displays that made no sense to his audience. But there's more. This ship isn't just a memorial. It's a weapon that could destroy the galaxy if it ever became unstable. The exotic matter doesn't just exist between dimensions. It actively weakens the barriers between realities. Veltar's crystalline form flashed with alarm. You mean this ship could create another dimensional breach? Not just could, Marcus said quietly. Will. The exotic matter has been building up energy for 3 centuries. Eventually, it will reach critical mass and tear open another hole in space. When that happens, it won't just consume one solar system. It will spread across the galaxy like a cancer, destroying everything in its path. The medical bay fell silent as the implications sank in. Captain Zexhai was the first to speak. How long do we have? Marcus consulted the displays on the control panel, his enhanced biology interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Based on current energy buildup rates, maybe 50 years. Could be less if the ship experiences any major stress or damage. Then we need to find a way to discharge the energy safely, Veltar said, or find a way to stabilize the exotic matter permanently. I've been trying for 300 years, Marcus replied. The problem is that the exotic matter is fundamentally incompatible with our reality. It's like trying to mix oil and water on a quantum level. The only reason the ship has stayed stable this long is because I've been manually adjusting the quantum fields 24 hours a day. He looked at each of his rescuers in turn. That's why I couldn't let myself die. Not because I was afraid of death, but because the moment I stop maintaining the balance, this ship becomes the most dangerous object in the galaxy. I've been the finger in the dike, holding back a flood that could destroy everything. Thrix stepped forward, his warrior, instincts recognizing the threat. Then we need to find another solution. The Confederation has the best scientists in known space. Surely someone can figure out how to neutralize this threat. Marcus smiled, but it was filled with sadness rather than hope. I appreciate the optimism, Commander. But some problems can't be solved by throwing more smart people at them. This is a mess that only a human could make, and it might take human solutions to fix it. What do you mean? Zexhai asked. Humans have always specialized in doing impossible things through sheer stubborn determination, Marcus explained. We don't accept that something can't be done, so we keep trying until we make it work. Sometimes that gets us in trouble, like with Earth. But sometimes it's the only way to solve problems that don't have logical solutions. He looked back out at the stars, at the vast galaxy full of life that didn't know it was in danger. I've spent 3 centuries thinking about this problem. I know exactly what needs to be done. The question is whether I'm brave enough to do it, and whether I can find the strength to finally stop refusing to die. Dr. Veltar moved closer, her crystalline form glowing with concern. Marcus, what are you talking about? But Marcus Chen just smiled and returned to his soup. Let me get my strength back first. Then I'll show you what it really means to be human. Marcus Chen was examining the quantum core readings in the Prometheus engine room when the first warning signals began flashing red across every screen. He had been aboard his impossible ship for only 6 hours since leaving the medical bay, but already he felt more alive than he had in decades. Having people to talk to, even for a short time, had reminded him why he had fought so hard to stay alive. "Marcus!" Captain Zexhi's voice crackled through the communication system. "We're detecting multiple ships approaching at high speed. Unknown configuration." Marcus placed his hand on the central control console, his enhanced nervous system, connecting directly with the ship's sensors. Through the Prometheus's impossible technology, he could see what was coming long before normal sensors would detect them. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Get your people back to the Harmony's Edge right now," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Those aren't explorers or traders. Those are void seekers." "What are void seekers?" Zexhi asked, as his team hurried back to their own ship. Marcus was already moving through the Prometheus corridors toward the bridge, his body moving faster than should have been possible for someone who had been in stasis for so long. "They're a machine intelligence, older than most of the civilizations in your confederation. They consider themselves the guardians of reality itself. They hunt down anything that threatens the stability of normal space." He reached the bridge and settled into the captain's chair that had been empty for 3 centuries. As his hands touched the controls, the ship came alive around him. Lights brightened, engines hummed with power, and weapon systems that hadn't been active in generations began charging up. "And your ship definitely qualifies as a threat," Commander Thrix observed, grimly as he watched the readings from the Harmony's Edge. "Oh yes," Marcus said, his fingers flying over controls that responded to his thoughts as much as his touch. "To the Void Seekers, the Prometheus is an infection in the fabric of space-time itself. They've probably been tracking the ship's quantum signature for years, waiting for the right moment to strike." On the main screen, space began to shimmer and twist. 12 massive vessels emerged from what looked like tiers in reality itself. They were sleek and black, shaped like enormous spearheads with surfaces that seemed to absorb light. Each ship was twice the size of the Harmony's Edge and bristling with weapons that glowed with unnatural energy. "Confederation vessel," a cold, emotionless voice spoke over all communication channels. "You will withdraw from the vicinity of the quantum anomaly immediately. This sector will be sterilized to prevent further contamination of local space-time." "Like hell," Marcus muttered, bringing the Prometheus's defensive systems online. Shields that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously wrapped around the ship like layers of reality itself. Captain Zexhi opened a channel to the Void Seekers. "This is Captain Zexhi of the Galactic Confederation ship Harmony's Edge. We are conducting a peaceful scientific mission. We request permission to continue our research." "Request denied," the Void Seekers replied. "The quantum anomaly has reached critical threat status. Immediate termination is required. You have 30 seconds to withdraw, or you will be considered hostile." "Captain," Marcus called over the communication link, "get your ship as far away from here as possible. These things don't negotiate, and they definitely don't show mercy to anyone who gets in their way." "We're not leaving you to face them alone," Zexhi replied firmly. "Yes, you are," Marcus said. And suddenly, the Harmony's Edge found itself pushed away from the battle zone by an invisible force. "I won't have more deaths on my conscience. This is my fight." The 30 seconds expired, and the Void Seekers opened fire. Beams of pure darkness lanced out from their weapons, each one designed to unravel matter at the quantum level. Normal shields would have been useless against such weapons, but the Prometheus was far from normal. Marcus guided the ship through evasive maneuvers that defied physics. The vessel slipped between dimensions, existing in multiple places at once, phasing in and out of reality like a ghost. The Void Seeker weapons passed harmlessly through empty space where the ship had been microseconds before. "Impossible," Dr. Veldtar whispered as she watched from the Harmony's Edge. "No ship can move like that." "No normal ship," Thrix corrected, his warrior's eye following the battle with professional interest. "But look at the energy readings. Each time that ship phases, it's putting enormous stress on local space-time." Marcus felt the strain, too. Every impossible maneuver he performed sent feedback through his enhanced nervous system. The exotic matter in his body resonated with the ship's quantum fields, and he could feel both growing more unstable with each passing moment. But he had learned long ago to ignore pain when there was work to do. "Let's see how you handle this," he said, targeting the lead Void Seeker vessel. The Prometheus's weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of firing energy or projectiles, they fired pure possibility. Beams of quantum uncertainty struck the Void Seeker ships, causing sections of their hull to suddenly exist in multiple states simultaneously. Some parts became solid, others became energy, and still others simply ceased to exist entirely. 2 of the Void Seeker ships were destroyed in the first salvo, their quantum-based systems unable to handle the reality-warping effects of the Prometheus's weapons. The remaining 10 ships immediately changed tactics, surrounding the impossible ship and firing in coordinated patterns designed to pin it in normal space. "They're learning," Marcus observed with grudging respect. "These things adapt fast." He pushed the Prometheus harder, forcing the ship to exist in 7 different dimensions simultaneously while firing at targets in 4 of them. The strain was incredible, but the results were devastating. 3 more Void Seekers fell to attacks that came from directions that didn't technically exist. But the battle was taking its toll. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as quantum fields began fluctuating wildly. The exotic matter that powered the ship was becoming more and more unstable, and Marcus could feel his own enhanced biology starting to break down under the stress. "The ship's quantum signature is spiking," Veltar reported from the Harmony's edge. "If this continues, it could trigger a dimensional cascade." Marcus knew she was right. Each impossible maneuver brought the ship closer to complete quantum collapse. If that happened, the resulting explosion wouldn't just destroy the Void Seekers. It would tear a hole in space-time that could consume several star systems. But he refused to give up. 300 years of solitude had taught him that humans could endure anything if they were stubborn enough. And Marcus Chen was the most stubborn human who had ever lived. "You want to see impossible?" he said to the remaining Void Seekers. "Let me show you what a human can do when he absolutely refuses to quit." He placed both hands on the quantum core interface, allowing his enhanced nervous system to merge completely with the ship's impossible technology. Pain shot through every cell in his body as human consciousness integrated with exotic matter systems that existed outside normal reality. The Prometheus began to change. The ship's hull flowed like liquid metal, reshaping itself according to Marcus's will. Weapons appeared where none had existed before. Engines multiplied and merged, creating propulsion systems that drew power from the collapse of alternate universes. The remaining Void Seekers fired everything they had at the transforming ship, but their weapons were useless. The Prometheus existed in too many dimensions for normal attacks to be effective. Marcus had turned the ship into a living manifestation of human determination, a vessel that refused to be destroyed because its pilot refused to accept defeat. One by one, the Void Seeker ships fell. Some were destroyed by weapons that fired backwards through time. Others were consumed by gravity fields that existed in negative space. The last 2 ships tried to retreat, but Marcus pursued them through dimensional barriers that should have been impenetrable. When the battle was over, only debris remained where the Void Seeker fleet had been. The Prometheus floated in space, its hull slowly returning to its normal configuration. But the ship was badly damaged, and more importantly, its quantum signature was now completely unstable. "Marcus!" Zexhai called over the communication system. "Are you all right?" Marcus tried to answer, but blood was running from his nose and ears. The strain of merging with the ship's systems had pushed his enhanced biology past its limits. He could feel his cellular structure beginning to break down, the exotic matter in his body finally starting to reject its human host. "I'm fine," he lied, wiping blood from his face. But we have a bigger problem. That battle pushed the ship's exotic matter past the critical threshold. The quantum cascade isn't 50 years away anymore. He looked at the readings on his console, each number confirming his worst fears. We have maybe 6 hours before this ship tears a hole in reality that will consume half the galaxy, and I'm not strong enough to hold it together anymore. The communication channel was quiet for a long moment. Then Captain HFY spoke, his voice filled with determination. Then we'll find another way. The Confederation has resources, technology, scientists who might be able to help. Marcus smiled sadly as he felt another wave of quantum feedback wash through his failing body. Marcus Chen stood in the engine room of the Prometheus, watching the quantum cascade readings climb higher with each passing minute. His hands shook as exotic matter feedback coursed through his deteriorating nervous system. The battle with the Void Seekers had pushed both him and the ship beyond their limits, and now the price was coming due. Captain HFY, Dr. Veltar, and Commander Thrix had returned to the impossible ship despite Marcus's protests. They stood around the central console, watching the readings with growing alarm. "The quantum field is expanding exponentially," Veltar reported, her crystalline body flickering with distress. "At this rate, the dimensional breach will begin forming in 4 hours and 37 minutes. "And when it does?" HFY asked. Marcus wiped blood from his nose before answering. "Best case scenario? It consumes this entire solar system before burning itself out. Worst case? It creates a chain reaction that spreads across the galaxy, unraveling space-time wherever it goes. Either way, billions of people die." Thrix studied the tactical displays showing the expanding quantum field. "What about evacuation? If we warn the Confederation, they could begin moving people away from the affected areas." "There aren't enough ships in the galaxy to evacuate even 1% of the worlds that would be at risk," Marcus replied. "And we don't have years to organize an evacuation. We have hours." Dr. Veltar ran more calculations through her biological computer matrix. "Marcus, what if we tried to contain the breach? If we could build a quantum field generator large enough, we might be able to create a barrier that would hold the exotic matter in check." Marcus shook his head. "I've run those numbers thousands of times over the past 3 centuries. The power requirements would be enormous, and we'd need materials that don't exist in normal space. Even if it worked, it would only delay the inevitable." "Then what do you suggest?" HFY asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying displays that showed the Prometheus's quantum signature spreading like an infection through local space. "There is one option, but it's not one that any rational person would consider." "Tell us," Veltar said. "The exotic matter wants to return to its home dimension," Marcus explained. "It's been fighting to get back there for 3 centuries, and I've been fighting to keep it here." "What if I stopped fighting and let it go home?" Thrix frowned. "Wouldn't that just create the dimensional breach we're trying to prevent?" "Not if it's done correctly," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger as he worked through the possibilities. "Instead of letting the exotic matter tear a random hole in space, I could guide it to a specific location where the breach would do the least damage." "Where?" HFY asked. Marcus pulled up a star chart showing the local sector. "There's a black hole about 12 light-years from here. If I could pilot the Prometheus into the black hole's event horizon and trigger the quantum cascade there, the gravitational field would contain the dimensional breach. Instead of spreading outward, the exotic matter would be pulled into the singularity and neutralized." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Dr. Veltar was the first to speak. "Marcus, that's suicide. No one can survive inside a black hole, not even someone with your enhanced biology." "I know," Marcus said simply, "but it's the only way to save the galaxy." "There has to be another solution," HFY insisted. "We could contact the Confederation's top scientists, have them work on the problem. Maybe they could find a way to Stabilize the exotic matter permanently. Marcus smiled sadly. Captain, I've been the Confederation's top expert on exotic matter for 300 years, whether they knew it or not. I've had more time to study this problem than any scientist in galactic history. If there was another way, I would have found it by now. But you said the Void Seekers were wrong, Thrix pointed out. They wanted to destroy your ship to prevent a catastrophe, but you fought them off. Now you're saying they were right? No, Marcus said firmly. The Void Seekers were wrong about the method, not the threat. They wanted to destroy the ship using brute force, which would have caused the quantum cascade immediately. What I'm proposing is controlled demolition instead of random destruction. He walked over to a wall display showing images of Earth from before the first disaster. Green continents, blue oceans, white clouds swirling in peaceful patterns. My species made a terrible mistake when we tore the first hole in reality. We were so eager to reach the stars that we didn't think about the consequences. Now I have a chance to fix that mistake, but only if I'm willing to pay the ultimate price. This is insane, Veltar said, her crystalline form flashing with agitation. You've survived for 3 centuries against impossible odds. You've outlasted the destruction of your entire civilization. You can't just give up now. I'm not giving up, Marcus replied. For 300 years I've refused to die because I had work to do. Now the most important work of all is before me, and it requires me to finally accept death. That's not giving up. That's completing the mission. Captain Zexhai moved closer to Marcus. What about your ship's databases? You said they contain the last records of human civilization. If you take the Prometheus into a black hole, all of that knowledge will be lost forever. Marcus had already considered that problem. Not if I transfer the data first. Your ship has enough storage capacity to hold humanity's complete cultural database. History, art, literature, scientific discoveries, everything we ever created or dreamed of creating. It won't be lost if I give it to you. And what are we supposed to do with it? Thrix asked. Remember us, Marcus said simply. Study our achievements and our mistakes. Learn from both. Humans weren't perfect, but we had some good ideas about how to face the impossible. Maybe those ideas can help the galaxy in ways we never imagined. Dr. Veltar ran new calculations. Marcus, even if this plan works, piloting the ship into a black hole will take enormous skill and precision. The gravitational fields will tear apart any normal vessel long before it reaches the event horizon. And with your enhanced biology breaking down from the quantum feedback, you might not survive the journey. Then I'll have to be very stubborn about staying alive long enough to complete the mission, Marcus replied with a ghost of his old smile. Humans have always been good at surviving just long enough to do one last impossible thing. He began working at the ship's controls, preparing to transfer humanity's cultural database to the Harmony's edge. I need you to promise me something. When people ask how humanity died, don't tell them we were fools who destroyed the... Marcus Chen sat alone on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the black hole grow larger on his view screen. The massive gravitational well pulled at his ship with forces that should have torn any normal vessel apart hours ago. But the Prometheus was far from normal, and Marcus had long ago stopped believing in the word impossible. Behind him, the quantum cascade readings climbed steadily toward critical levels. The exotic matter throughout the ship was becoming more unstable with each passing minute, reality itself starting to bend and warp around the vessel. He could feel the dimensional barriers weakening, sense the growing tear in space-time that would soon consume everything if he failed in his mission. Prometheus to Harmony's edge, he said into his communications system. I'm beginning final approach to the event horizon. Estimate 12 minutes until quantum cascade initiation. Captain Zexhai's voice crackled back through the subspace interference caused by the black hole's gravity. Marcus, are you certain about this? Our long-range sensors show massive gravitational distortions around your ship. You might not make it to the event horizon. Marcus smiled as he adjusted the ship's quantum fields to better handle the increasing gravitational stress. "Captain, I've been defying physics for 3 centuries. I'm not about to let a little gravity stop me now." Through the Prometheus's enhanced sensors, he could see the Harmony's edge maintaining a safe distance several light hours away. The Confederation ship was broadcasting updates to nearby systems, warning them of possible gravitational anomalies, but not revealing the true scope of the threat. No point in causing panic throughout the galaxy in what might be their final hours. All human cultural databases have been successfully transferred and verified, Dr. Veltar reported. "We have complete records of your species' history, art, science, and philosophy. Nothing will be lost." "Thank you," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. "That means more to me than you know." The ship shuddered as they passed through. Another gravitational wave. Normal physics said the Prometheus should have been stretched apart like taffy by now, but the exotic matter in its hull allowed it to exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. Marcus was essentially piloting a ghost ship that only partially existed in normal space. "Marcus!" Commander Thrix called over the communication channel. "I wanted you to know that I've already submitted a report to Confederation Military Command, recommending that we establish new tactical doctrines based on human strategic thinking. Your approach to the impossible will be studied and taught to future generations." "I hope they learn the right lessons," Marcus said as he made another course correction. "Humans weren't perfect warriors. We were just too stubborn to admit when we were beaten." The event horizon was now visible as a sphere of absolute darkness against the star field. Nothing that crossed that boundary had ever returned to tell what lay beyond. Marcus would be the first conscious being to voluntarily cross into a black hole's interior, and he would be the last to ever do so. "Quantum cascade approaching critical threshold," he announced. "Beginning final descent." The ship dove toward the event horizon, its impossible engines drawing power from the collapse of nearby space-time. Marcus felt the exotic matter in his own body resonating with the ship's quantum fields, his enhanced biology finally beginning to break down after 3 centuries of impossible endurance. Blood ran from his eyes and nose as feedback from the quantum cascade tore through his nervous system. His cellular structure, held together by stubborn determination and exotic energy for longer than any human had a right to live, was finally accepting defeat. But not yet. Not until the job was done. 30 seconds to event horizon, he reported, his voice growing weaker. Exotic matter containment at maximum instability. This is going to work. As the Prometheus crossed the point of no return, Marcus felt a strange sense of peace. For 300 years, he had carried the weight of humanity's greatest mistake. He had lived with the knowledge that his species' ambition had destroyed their homeworld and threatened the galaxy itself. Now, finally, he could set that burden. "Down!" "Marcus!" Captain Zexhai called urgently. "We're detecting massive quantum fluctuations from your position. What's happening?" "The exotic matter is coming home," Marcus replied, his hands dancing over controls that responded to his thoughts, as much as his touch. "I can feel the dimensional barriers breaking down. The breach is forming exactly where we need it to." The black hole's interior was unlike anything in normal space. Here, time moved differently, gravity flowed in impossible directions, and the laws of physics became mere suggestions. The exotic matter that had kept the Prometheus running for centuries finally found an environment where it belonged. Instead of tearing a random hole in space-time, the exotic matter was being absorbed by the black hole's singularity. The dimensional breach that would have consumed star systems was being contained within a gravitational field so strong that even reality itself couldn't escape. "It's working," Marcus whispered, watching as the last of the exotic matter drained away from the ship's systems. "The cascade is contained. The galaxy is safe." The Prometheus began to break apart as its impossible technology finally failed. Without the exotic matter to hold it together, the ship was just metal and ceramic falling into a gravity well that crushed atoms into their component particles. But Marcus wasn't afraid. He had done what he set out to do 3 centuries ago when he first refused to let himself die. He had protected something larger than himself, preserved something precious, and faced the impossible with human determination. Prometheus to Harmony's edge, he said into his failing communication system. Mission accomplished. The threat has been neutralized. Humanity's last engineer is finally going off duty. The last thing Marcus Chen heard before the communication system failed was the sound of hundreds of voices from across the Confederation fleet singing an old human song they had learned from the cultural databases. Amazing Grace, performed by alien voices in harmony with frequencies no human throat could produce. He closed his eyes and smiled as the Prometheus disappeared into the singularity, taking with it the last physical trace of humanity's presence in the galaxy. 6 months later, the Marcus Chen Memorial Institute opened its doors on the Confederation capital world. Dr. Veltar served as its first director, leading a team of scientists from dozens of species in studying human approaches to impossible problems. The Human Paradox, Veltar's groundbreaking paper on human psychology, became required reading at universities across the galaxy. It explored how humanity's illogical refusal to accept limitations had led to breakthrough discoveries that more rational species would never have attempted. Commander Thrix integrated human tactical principles into Confederation military doctrine. The new strategies emphasized adaptability, creative thinking, and the willingness to attempt solutions that seemed impossible. When the Confederation faced its next cosmic crisis 3 years later, they won by doing exactly what their enemies thought was impossible. Captain Zexhai established the Human Legacy Project, dedicated to spreading humanity's cultural achievements throughout the galaxy. Human music, literature, and art found new audiences among species that had never imagined such creative expressions. Human philosophy influenced political movements on 1,000 worlds, but perhaps the most important legacy was simpler than any of these formal institutions. Across the galaxy, when people faced problems that seemed impossible to solve, they began asking themselves a new question. What would a human do? The answer was always the same. Refuse to give up, think of something impossible, and then figure out how to make it work. Marcus Chen had been wrong about one thing. He wasn't the last human in the galaxy. In teaching other species to think like humans, to face the impossible with determination and creativity, he had ensured that humanity's spirit would live on in countless alien minds. The impossible ship was gone, destroyed in the heart of a black hole. But the human who refused to die had left behind something far more powerful than any vessel. He had infected an entire galaxy with humanity's most dangerous idea, that impossible was just another word for not yet achieved. And in the end, that might have been the most human thing of all, turning a final defeat into an impossible victory that would echo through the stars for generations to come.